Good, welcome. On behalf of Georgetown Global Friends, 450 strong, and AUC, the World Group, and many other university clubs, of which some of you have been invited and we're very good at being on this. We are pleased with the have a formidable panel who's talking about an issue that I think all of us can recognize is quite material today and I would like to just acknowledge the generosity of our hosts tonight for making this available to us as well. Thank you. And with that, I will pass it over to Camilla, who will be moderating some of these events, introducing the speakers. We're in the context of constant change in an environment in which one we argue with saying is challenging us mentally, physically, and on many levels. And with that, we'll have the unique opportunity to have perspective experts on the topic. Thank you, guys. And without further ado,
Okay, so actually a little impromptu thing. Good evening, everyone. But we're going to little exercise before we begin because I think Tuesday night everyone's rushing in, stressed out, it's going to be late. Oh my God. So I've asked the ladies on my left before, I'm not going to introduce anyone, but so let's take a breath and arrive.
You're going to give the context?
Yeah.
Sorry. So I give workshops for the United Nations, and this is called the moment to awake. So there's nothing that you need to do specifically, just sitting down and maybe like moving your back away, the back of the chair, so we're in a beautiful upright position. And then maybe loosening shoulders. If you want, it's really mandatory, but if you want, maybe just lower the gaze. Just taking a moment to arrive here, and I'm going to pass it on to Pascal.
So you can either rest your eyes, close your eyes, or just focus and fix on the spot in the distance. And whenever you're ready, just come into your body and start focusing on your breath. And I'm going to invite you to take a really nice deep inhale through the nose, slowly, starting right at the bottom of your chest and rising all the way up. And then whenever you're ready, just exhaling through the nose, or if you want to, through pursed lips, as if you're breathing out through the string. I'm going to just take one more deep breath in and out. With that time, in and out.
It's very last minute, but I'm sorry, I made you feel very last minute.
Especially late last minute, because I was not supposed to moderate tonight. So, pardon the paper, Noelle, I would like to thank as well, who brought all these fabulous things here tonight, is ill. She's fine, but she could not be here to moderate. So, thinking about her, and I will try to do my best in moderating this. So, and this is all things that she's written, so bear with me. Start with some statistics, which perhaps are not as positive as we would want them to be. So, work is now the #1 factor impacting mental health and the quality of our lives. We spend more time at work than with our children, our partners, and sleeping. Nearly half of employees say their mental health already affects how well they work, and yet we do not often speak about our mental health related to work. Does that resonate with a lot of people? The impact of lack of investment in mental wellness on individuals and companies is clear. People are showing up less. 1, psychological disorders are the #1 cause of long-term sick leave, 32%. 36% of employees have already taken several days off due to mental health. I can say that's one of them. This figure rises to 45% among HR professionals, if you can believe that. People are opting out and resigning. 46% of managers say they're ready to leave their job because they have to deal with too many psychological or emotional issues at work. 2, only 16% of managers feel well equipped to handle these issues. And 3, 20% of employees under 35 have already resigned due to mental health reasons. 35 reasons. People are physically present, but not engaged. 47% of employees report having worked less or less effectively because of their mental health. So this is not just a workplace issue, it's a global mental health crisis affecting individuals, leaders and founders. 65% of startups fail due to human capital risk, youth and younger generations, and society at large. And today we're navigating all of this alongside AI, which is accelerating pace, pressure, and existential questions about purpose. Tonight we want to shift the conversation from wellness as a nice to have to mental wellness as a performance skill for the nervous system. From reaction to prevention, and leave each of you with a few tools to live well. With this context in mind, I want to introduce you to our incredible panel for spending the work time dedicated to improving the lives of individuals and the performance of companies. So we're gonna work from my right to left, so everyone can introduce themselves and what they do.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Pascal Blanchett, and I am a breathwork and somatic coach. What do I mean by somatic? Soma is just the Greek word for body. So when I do one-to-one sessions with clients, rather than starting up here, we just start in the body. And the key theme that goes through my work is helping people build emotional regulation. So to what extent can you be in very stressful, high-performance environments and be controlled, grounded, and calm?
That's really good. Hi everyone, my name is Eugénie. I'm French, if you can hear it, but I'm really happy to practice my English again tonight. I'm the founder of Bloom, with the first modern meditation studio in France, and also we're an amazing app which is called the Bloom Space, and you'll see there's a little gift about that tonight for you. I'm also a mindfulness instructor. I'm a former CNN journalist, but I talked about that before. I also have a law degree. I work in politics. I struggled a lot with my mental health, and this is why I started Bloom. So what are we?
Hi everyone, my name is Sabine Flechet. I'm French, I live in Munich, in Germany. I'm a co-founding partner at Massawa. We are a venture capital fund dedicated to mental health innovation. That means that we invest at the intersection of tech and mental health, and not only mental illness solutions that tackle eating disorder, depression, burnout, schizophrenia, trauma, PTSD, you name it, so more on the medical side. But we also look at the social determinants of mental health. So anything which is kind of linked to your lifestyle, your social habits, like how you work, where you live, how you were educated, because that actually reflects indirectly on your mental health. So you look at nutrition, employee well-being, you look at financial wellness, and we look especially at AI and the implication of AI on our youth.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Soha. I'm a psychologist by training. I'm originally from the United States. That's where I trained as a mental health counselor. And I started my career there in very clinical settings. So I worked a lot with families and children who were struggling with complex trauma. And the reason I got absorbed into the corporate world is when I moved to France, I started my practice, and I noticed while working with a lot of white-collar workers and expats in Paris that there were problems that couldn't necessarily be solved just in therapy, but the solution of the problem lied in organizational change. So I joined Mocha Care, which is a company that works in partnership with other companies to help them develop their mental well-being strategy. So my day-to-day is really involved in talking to companies and showing them or guiding them on how to take better care of their employee well-being through a lot of workshops, conferences. But the heart of my career is still my one-to-one sessions and my clients that I work with on an individual basis.
Thank you. So there's a little prompt here at the beginning that Noel drew up. It says, before going further, let's speak about what we mean by mental health. Who defines it as a state of well-being in which individuals realize their abilities, cope with normal stresses, work productively, and contribute to their community. We are not focusing on clinical treatment alone, but on everyday capacity, regulation, and resilience. Mental health strain shows up as difficulty focusing, chronic fatigue, irritability and emotional reactivity, decision fatigue, and quiet disengagement. These are often mislabeled as motivation issues, lack of resilience, or personal failure, when in reality, they're signals of overload. So we'll start up with our questions. The first are on my right, to Eugenie and Pascal. Why should mental wellness be a priority for individuals today? How can we practice healthy habits, notably around addiction, to screens?
Thanks for that question. So I'll start here because I wanted to bring a little bit of my personal stories. I think if we're here, mental health is a very hot topic for us. So when I was a journalist at CNN, I experienced PTSD because I was sent to all the terrorist attacks scenes between 2015 and 2018. And my dream, long life dream, was to become a war correspondent. And I ended up working with my absolute idol, Christiane Amanpour, who maybe some of you know. And she's amazing. I still love her. But yeah, I ended up just being dragged on scenes that were very raw and witnessed a lot of stuff, and that created a lot of PTSD, and I didn't know it was PTSD at the time, and so I started talking about it to my boss, who said, maybe you should try mindfulness. And I literally laughed at her face and said, that's never going to work for me, and here I am, just promoting mindfulness everywhere.
Just because some people might not know the acronym.
Yeah, for PTSD, yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so for me, it came with lots of symptoms. So I developed hypothyroidism, which is a dysregulation due to an emotional shock. I had hot flashes, I had nightmares, I had just a lot of symptoms that were coming back to me. I would freeze, I would just go into panic attacks. It was really not pleasant. And so mindfulness came in my life at a moment that I felt really, really unwell, and my husband is here in the audience today, and he can maybe witness that, but yeah. And so I started just becoming interested in the topic of mindfulness because there's over 3,000 studies that just prove the benefits of mindfulness. I trained with Brown University to become a mindfulness instructor. Because I experienced trauma, I also did a trauma-sensitive mindfulness training with David Trelevan, who's just exceptional, and please look him up tonight. And so that's how the idea of Bloom just came, and mindfulness and just using tools like meditation, just 10 minutes a day really had a massive impact on my life, and I think on realizing the sources of stress in my life. So yeah, I think the question is a bit broad, but basically, and I think Sabine had mentioned that actually, that the spectrum of mental health is very, very wide.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we define it at Masawa. I mean, the idea that mental health is a silo domain which doesn't interact with physical health or with behaviors or with leadership is I'm sorry for my French, bullshit, because it has a direct impact on everything of your life. And that's why when we invest in mental health, we cannot just look at the clinically evidenced medical solutions. We also have to look at nutrition, because there are now studies that connect your gut health to your brain health, and can expect, based on your gut health and your microbiome, why you're having depression. There are also studies around the implications of AI, smartphone addiction, social media addictions, but also the evolution of AI into anthropomorphic AI, which is pretty much a threat to your attachment, that will develop also some additional disorders, especially for our young children. And so we decided that we cannot just invest in innovations that will be resolved through the medical care. We need also to have solutions that are on a day-to-day basis more looking at behavioral change, how you build healthy habits, how do you integrate sleep, fitness, mindfulness, breath work into your lifestyle to recognize when you are stressed, when you are like lacking attention, and where you can actually bring the best of you in the workplace, but also in your family setting. So every external that's why we call it social determinants, because it's every single external factor from your lifestyle, social habits that have an impact on your mental health. It can be from housing, it can be from how you were educated, it can be trauma from generation. We also talk about epidemiologic mental health issues. So I will stop here, but it's a vast domain, and it has a lot of interconnections with everything.
And yeah, just to add, why I think it's so important that we prioritize it. Also, just in my opinion, the word mental health I have a thing to, because I feel like when you show up to work with a broken arm, or you don't show up to work with a broken arm, people are okay, fine. But if you say I'm not showing up for anxiety and depression, you get viewed on very differently. And so the words I like to use is mental strength, or even mindset. Are we building a strong mindset? And why this matters so much is because if I asked everyone in this room, who do you talk to most? You're probably going to say your husband, your best friend, your colleagues at work. But the reality is the person you talk to most, and I'm laughing because we've done this work together, but the person you talk to most is the person inside your head. And this relationship and narrative with the person inside your head, you can only fix, given that my fundamental belief is the world's going mad, but you can only fix once you understand where your body is. And are you in a fight, flight, stress response and an SOS response, or can you, in the wellness, meditation, mindfulness, breath work, regulate yourself, as in control your state and be calm, to allow this mindset start to quieten down. And the moment you're able to quieten down around yourself, then you build the mental strength. And the irony is the best athletes in the world, the best performers, they all prioritize this skill immensely, just as much as their physical training. And us mere mortals in our day-to-day, we live life as if rabbits in a headlight, going from A to B to C to before we realize until it's too late. And so for me, that's why it's so important, just as much as physical strength, to build this mental strength. Because again, we're going to get onto it later with AI, the speed of the world is not built for the bodies that we have and the nervous systems we have, and we need to be given the coping mechanisms that are from within us, not from the medication, not from the quick fix, whatever drug, and this is the space that we start building those coping mechanisms together.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to our next point. I'm looking at Soha. This will be yours. Why is mental health and wellness a strategic business issue? Wait, I'm supposed to? No, this is you. Go ahead. Sorry. Sorry, this is with the last minute, humor.
I love this question because I work. Sorry. Pardon. I work on this every day. It's really, really interesting. Thank you. It's really interesting to see what really catches the eye of people that are working in the corporate environment. Because the minute you bring up mental health, you see closed doors. Nobody wants to talk about mental health. It's still something that's really stigmatized. But we're now realizing that for three main reasons, businesses need to prioritize and make sure that mental well-being is a priority for their companies. The first one is very simply, it's a legal obligation. So this is one strategy that we use to bring people into the conversation, which is according to the Code du Travail, if you're a business in France, according to that, you're obligated to assure the mental and the physical well-being of your employees. The place where we see this the most, and this is something that's happening a lot nowadays, is we're in an economic crisis. People are restructuring. There's a lot of layoffs that are happening. In France, particularly, when you need the commission to approve a plan social PSE, which is a plan to lay off more than X number of people, they make sure that you have something in place legally to take care of the mental well-being of your employees, even the employees that you're letting go. They're not going to accept you laying off these employees unless you prove to them that you have put in place certain measures to take care of their mental well-being. So that's the one thing. The second thing that we're really noticing is that companies have an economic interest. There was, and some of you might have heard about this, back in 2016, a study that was done by the WHO, where they said that there was a loss of 1 trillion USD in our economy because of mental health disorders, particularly depression and anxiety. On the flip side, because we like to be really positive, so that's a really negative statistic, but on the flip side of that, the study declared that for every $1 invested in the mental well-being, there's a $4 return in productivity. So companies understand this. They know that because of, and Camilla shared this earlier, one of the biggest reasons for loss in productivity due to long-term leave is mental well-being or mental health reasons. And we know this now. The third thing, which is the conversation that can be a bit more challenging, but it's one of, in my opinion, the most important one, is look at who's entering the workforce right now. We have millennials and Gen Z. And it's really important. Employee expectations are really important. Employees are expecting their employer to make sure that their mental well-being is taken care of. There was, back in 2004, a study done by Deloitte where they surveyed millennials and Gen Z, and almost 50% said that the care that an employer puts into mental well-being is one of their primary factors in the choice that they make, or the employer that they actually choose. So for those three main reasons, it's very clear that mental well-being is strategic. It is something that's extremely important, and companies need to start paying attention to it.
Thank you. Anyone want to, I know we have a script, but anyone want to add anything to?
No, I just wanted to follow up on what you just said, because we work in a lot of companies and we give a lot of classes, workshops, we name it, to different companies around mindfulness. And one person once went to me and she said, you know, I picked this company because they knew you guys were giving classes. I was like, that's amazing. So thank you, that's right.
So next, more statistics. Managers absorbing unprecedented emotional load for themselves and their teams. Nearly half of managers consider leaving due to emotional load. Only 16% feel equipped to handle mental health challenges. That's an enormous emotional and nervous system demand. And this is both for, well, Sabine and Pascal. So for Sabine, from an investor in governance, no, sorry, Sabine's over here. From an investor in governance perspective, what is the cost of ignoring leader and founder well-being?
Yeah, so something that I haven't actually mentioned earlier with the fund that we just created called Masawa is not only we invest in mental health innovation, but we also take care of the mental health of the founders. And we've learned, and I've been in the VC industry for the past 8 years, that, as you said, I think this quote came from our discussion previously. It's actually a quote from the Founder Dilemma, which is an article or a book, I think, which was written by a professor at Harvard, Noel Wasserman, which says that 65% of startup failures are due to human capital risk. What we call human capital risk are co-founders conflict, team misalignment, toxic work environment, a founder which is not developing well into a leader or a CEO, or lacking the leadership skills. And I've seen this firsthand. I mean, I had a portfolio in my previous fund of 70 companies. COVID happened, we were focusing on food tech, so you can imagine the chaos. From one day to the other, the market shut down. And I can tell you, those that actually survived that crisis were those with the right resilience, the right compassionate leadership, and the right well-being. They had the secure base, the safe space to be kind of breathe through these ups and downs, which is the roller coaster that entrepreneurs are facing. And so if you think that 65% of startups fail because of this team misalignment, co-founders conflict, as an investor, it's your duty, because you're managing the money on behalf of others, investors, to take care of that well-being, to make sure that these founders will burn out, that they will anticipate conflict, that they will be able to solve these conflicts, that they will be able to develop into good leaders. So at Massawa, we invest in this. We invest and provide access to leadership expert, coaches, therapists. We pay for these services. That's part of our management fee. And then we work with the founders on their interests, their needs. What we learned during also the due diligence. So when we evaluate startups and companies, we don't only look at the product market fit, the go-to-market, their strategy, the product, etc. We look at the team. It's funny because in VC, and I don't know how, like, what are you guys doing? Okay. How many are entrepreneurs? Okay, working in corporates? HR people? Investors? Okay. Yeah, so basically when we evaluate a company, we look at the people. We say VC or investing is a people business, but we never look at the people behind the business. So we really work out 2 hours workshop with the team to discuss their relationship to money, to ego, their definition of success, why they're doing what they're doing, and how long do they want to build this company, and what if they need to leave, just to kind of put the fish on the table, because it's not going to be rosy all the time. They're not going to have access to money eternally. So we really need to kind of anticipate a little bit what could go wrong and anticipate how they would react. And this is why we really look at them as human beings, their trauma, where do they come from? You know, have they had any issues in their families? How have they been educated? Do they still have their parents? Do they have kids? Are they married? I mean, all this is important because it has an impact on your business at the end of the day. And then we co-create, once we invest, we co-create with them this, what we call nurture capital plan, where we cover their needs, but also their interests, what we learned during the due diligence. And then from that, we curate and match them to leadership experts, to coaches. Sometimes it's just purely some initiatives that they want to implement within the organization, like breathwork. I mean, I'm working with an entrepreneur who is providing breathwork for our portfolio company. It's a basis, but this is, for us, a way to also cap our downside risk. If we have less failure, we have better returns. So, you know, yes, of course, the benefit is social, so we help them be well and thrive emotionally as much as our capital can help them thrive commercially or financially. But we also, on our end, try to have better returns by having less failure. So there is a business aspect, a must-have to take care of the well-being of your employees or your leaders. And I mean, I don't want to kind of cover the news, but we need to change the type of leaderships we have at the very high level of this, on this earth, because talking about politicians, but also talking about tech founders. I mean, is that the type of leaders you want to have for the tech companies that are kind of, you know, directing our lives? No. So.
Thank you. So picking up on what was in my intro of moving from reaction to prevention, the question from Pascal was, before burnout becomes visible, what do you see happening in leaders' bodies or behaviors?
So the thing with burnout is that it always initially starts from a good place. And so what I mean by that is take someone, you know, working for a corporate, they're in a role, they get hired into that role because they are good at that role, they have the skills for that role. And they start off having a lot of agency, excitement, I feel challenged, I feel good. But what starts to happen is you feel that sense of needing to prove yourself. And so with that feeling of wanting to prove, you say yes to things that ideally you would say no to, and so your boundaries start to climb. And what starts to happen is you get the onset of stress. And with the onset of stress, you're getting irregular sleep, you're starting to feel fatigued, your energy levels get lower. And then obviously, you know, the onset of stress becomes chronic stress, you're getting into exhaustion, you're getting into procrastination, maybe a bit of resentment, and then you have the burnout, which is, you know, from a somatic perspective, you get complete dissociation from the experience and withdrawal. And so my biggest tip, and when I do workshops, when I work with people one-to-one, my question is always, what is your stress signature? Because for every person in this room, that will be completely different. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when you get stressed, what does your body try and talk to you and tell you that is happening? So I've been in a number of workshops and, you know, worked with a lot of people where one person said, I blink a lot. It's like, I don't blink a lot, but you blink a lot. Great. So you know, when you blink a lot, this is your body saying, I need rest. My nervous system needs to feel down-regulated and take a break. For me, I always feel like, yeah, that's my sign. So for every one of you in this room, your body is trying to talk to you in a specific way. Understand that, and rather than do what everyone else usually does, which is push and push and push, listen to it, reset, and then get to go again. And before, if you have that connection, the burnout doesn't happen because you're so in tune with basically the signals that your nervous system and body is.
Segueing into that, mindfulness, meditation, breath work are often dismissed as soft. How do these practices function as performance skills for the nervous system? And what evidence do you see in high-performing organizations? Let's start with
Yeah, sure. Does everyone know what mindfulness is? Room? I see, yeah, okay. So mindfulness is meditation practice. Mindfulness is a very secular term. Originally, meditation comes from Buddhism. I'll just put it very shortly, I promise. And so it's the practice of paying attention to the present moment, next to what we call anchoring points to focus your attention. And there's basically over 3,000 studies that prove the scientific aspect and benefits of meditation and mindfulness meditation, which, by the way, was brought into our Western world thanks to the Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. I don't know if you've heard about him, but he started MPSR, which is the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, which is an 8-week stress reduction program that started with the University of Massachusetts and then was bought by Brown, which is why I trained there. But basically, mindfulness is the art of being present to what's here, and it helps you reduce stress. That's just an absolute fact, and it's with breath work too. The second thing, and that's something that really interested me because I am scientifically what you qualify as a hypersensitive person. I just feel emotions tremendously in my body, in my mind, which is a strength and really a curse sometimes, if you know what I mean. And so it helps you regulate your emotions, just welcome them, be at peace with yourself. If you feel anger, anger is actually a very healthy feeling, especially right now. And then what do I want to do with that anger? That's what mindfulness really helps you. It's not just a practice, it's something that comes with you in your everyday life. It's really a philosophy, and that's how I see it. I think that's how everyone should see it. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the impact of what we do in companies. So when I started Bloom originally, I didn't think that we would be doing a lot of B2B actions and be inside of companies. My goal was to create a place where anyone could just come in and take a mindfulness class. Just come as you are, as McDonald's says, and just try a mindfulness class. And that was really great, but then people started coming to us and saying, well, I tried your class, I work for this company, I work for like a French railway service, and we work with Chanel, we work at La Poste, we work with so many different companies, and so we started like offering those classes. And I think the best programs that we offer is, there's not one solution to each company. Each company has their different politics and, atmosphere, as we say in French. Things like that, and so we offer like stress reduction programs. For some people, for example, at Chanel, they have 6 mindfulness Bloom classes per week, which is pretty good, I'd say. With La RATP, for example, we provide some mindfulness classes for subway drivers who are at high stress levels as well. So there's your question was like, they're seen as soft, and I think that's something that also Sabine has mentioned. And so you've also mentioned this, but basically the problem in our society is that because you don't see mental health, people still struggle to understand what it really is. And companies that invest in tools like breathwork, mindfulness, and other tools really see less absenteeism. How do you say that in English? Absenteeism. So absenteeism, there are less arrêt de travail. Thank you. And all those things, and we see it, and there's There's actual data. I work with the UN, and I just wanted to highlight a little bit of the work that we do, because I'm the only spokesperson for that beautiful program that's called Peace on Purpose. We're a collective of about 15 people around the world, and we provide a mindfulness-based program for UN personnel around the world. As you know, UN funding has been extremely cut because of the current US administration, and there's a lot of stress. Our work is absolutely critical, and so we provide in-person workshops. So we go to places like Afghanistan, Syria. I went to like Senegal recently with the team, and then we also provide digital programs that really help. And there's a study that was just done, and over 1,000 UN personnel who are high stress, environments, and they shared that 70% of them felt so much better after using the tools, so it actually works.
Soft skills. So I think my two that I like to use, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with Tim Ferriss, but he pioneered the 4-day work week and has a very famous podcast. He also wrote a book called Tools of Titans. On his podcast, he interviews literally the most successful billionaires, performers, athletes in the world. And within the first few pages of his book, Tools of Titans, he goes, there is one skill or habit that 80% of all the people that I interviewed have. And what is that? Somebody today, mindfulness. And so if the most successful people on this planet use this as their anchor in their daily practice, I don't actually, quite frankly, think it's a soft skill. And then the second piece of research that was done by a Harvard professor called Dr. Stuart Avalon, in over 30 years of research, he comes up with 5 behaviors essentially, or skills. He calls them skills because you can learn these, that are needed to be at the top of your game. And what is one of these 5 skills? It's emotional and self-regulation skills. And how do you get emotional and self-regulation skills? Through mindfulness practices, through breathwork practices, through meditation, etc., etc. And I didn't mention this when I was introducing myself, but I think part of your question mentions how organizations taking this a bit more seriously. So I had a 10-year finance career, most of which was at Goldman Sachs. And I remember the day when they installed, with 40,000 employees, myself being one of them, free access to the Calm app. And I remember the day in the London office, because I was there for the majority of my career, when Jay Shetty, I don't know if you know Jay Shetty, but he came and spoke in the auditorium, and the auditorium was packed. You could not even get a seat in that auditorium. So, we've still got a long way to go, but the fact that organizations are taking this more seriously, and as June was saying, your bottom line, matters when you have people leaving the firm or leaving the startup when, due to human capital risk. So I think that's my take on the soft skills.
So going back to this side of the room, what is the responsibility of leadership in creating, which you partly answered already, I think, from your previous question, but if you want to add anything, responsibility of leadership in creating a culture that promotes mental wellness, and why is leadership commitment critical? And this is for both of you.
Well, I mean, leaders are role models, right? And they create a culture which trickles down to the entire organization. So if you were not walking the talk, I think you made a big mistakes as to how you're going to retain your employees, how you're going to also behave towards your customers and all your different stakeholders. It's not just purely like leaders and employees, but it's also, I see it in my environment in the VC industry. It's our LPs, our investors, it's our founders, but it's also how we co-invest with other investors. And I think this is a problem in certain industries where pressure, where speed are the essence, and you in an environment where if you start drifting away and pausing and having mental wellness, well-being, these terms, people see this as a weakness. It's vulnerability. I think this is where we need to change the narrative, and I like you rephrasing mental health into mental strength, because at the end of the day, it's about performance. And we need to kind of compare these leaders towards like athletes as well. I think you mentioned it as well. Mental health is part of their training. If you look at celebrities, mental health is also part of their training. If you want to be successful, you need to actually accept failure. You need to be dealing with closure, and that's the same as entrepreneurs. So I think like in terms of providing a safe space where mental health is not seen as a vulnerability but as a strength is the narrative that needs to change in organization and needs to come from our role models and from our leaders. And until we change our leaders right now on the political scene or in the tech scene, I think it's going to be still seen as a weakness, unfortunately, because people have promoted a type of capitalism or business mindset, which is killing the human being, and AI is not helping even.
Maybe building on what you're saying about leaders being the pivotal character that sets the culture of an organization. In my work, I see two kinds of approaches. So you have the top-down approach, where you start with the leaders. So we do a lot of workshops on training leaders on what is mental well-being, really destigmatizing it for them. And then there's the opposite approach, which is the bottom-up. So this is more where we come in when there's already a crisis that has happened in a company, where somebody has burnt out or somebody has done something worse, such as harming themselves because of the pressure that they've been put under. And in that case, it's more reactive, and companies will put something in place. For example, we want to have a conference on burnout, or we want to have a talk on how to manage your stress. At the end of those conferences, I usually get the question, is the comics also going to get this same talk? Or is the comics also going to get this workshop? So we know very well which of those specific approaches is the one that's more long-lasting, the one that's going to have a better impact. And we talk a lot about leaders being the role model. When we do workshops for leaders, we often talk about psychological safety. Psychological safety is really a concept that was studied for many, many years at Google, and it was tied to performance. So the highest performing teams at Google were the ones that had psychological safety, meaning people in the team were comfortable making mistakes, admitting their mistakes. They were comfortable asking questions. They were comfortable to say when something was maybe not going right. So they had this feeling of feeling okay to bring their whole self to work. When we train leaders on how to develop psychological safety, because leaders have this very, very significant influence in how psychological safety trickles down into an organization, the one tip that we always give to a leader is share a moment when you made a mistake. Show your vulnerability to the company. I don't know if many of you ever recall the founder or the CEO of a company standing up and saying, I made a mistake this one time, and this is what I learned from it, and how big the impact was in you feeling secure making mistakes, especially if you're someone that's new, if you're an intern, if you're just learning. All that to say, it's extremely crucial that leaders take well-being and psychological safety seriously, because that's the approach that really works. Otherwise, what we're doing is really just patching over and putting a band-aid on a system that is flawed internally and is never going to change.
Maybe just adding on this, because that reminded me of a training I did in Lausanne at IND called High Performance Leadership Training, and they talk about secure base. And a high-performing leader is someone who can be a secure base to someone else. That secure base provides safety, but it provides also daring. So it's kind of this kind of combination or symbiosis between caring and daring. So you're providing a comfort space to the employees, to your stakeholder, to someone as a leader, but you also providing enough comfort so that the person can actually get outside of the box and start daring to take risks. And I think this is this pull and push type, which enables the best employees to thrive in the organization. And they were calling this secure base. So, and I really love that concept.
And it actually resonates with me because I read an article and I signed up for like 1 million newsletters from McKinsey recently. And like one of the articles though was about companies holding after-work drinks where the whole sole purpose was managers talking about a failure that they had in that workplace or previous workplace, and how that allows everyone to feel in like a safe space. And seeing also higher management failing and going through it and being successful again. So it's, when we were talking about that, it made me smile. And we're gonna go back to you, Silva, because the next question was, if prevention worked, what would feel different in a normal work day? What does success look and feel like? And we have some pillars coming from you here.
Yes, so it's a great question because oftentimes in even my personal practice, I use this question of your future, your desired future. So what would your ideal future look like if you had a magic wand and suddenly everything was magically perfect? So we ask this question a lot of what would concretely be different tomorrow if mental health was successfully something that we could treat in a preventive way, not necessarily in a reactive way. And there's a couple things. So we talk a lot about psychosocial risks. I won't go necessarily into all of what psychosocial risks are, but they're basically the risk factors that cause somebody to burn out or that cause someone to not do well at work. So concretely, what I think what would be different if we were successful at this is we would see those risk factors turn into what's called protective factors. For example, your work demands. If you're being contacted after hours, if your work, the amount of work that you're being given is actually sustainable, the demands that are being put to the intensity of working hours, it could be the pressure that you're under. What kind of working conditions are you in? Those working conditions, are they something that's set up to protect you, or is that something that's set up to create this kind of a risk of burnout? The second thing is emotional demands. Do you have in place support? Do you have managerial support? If you are not doing well, do you feel comfortable enough talking about it early instead of just being brave? When is it that you bring it up? So usually people will bring it up too late. Do you have that psychological safety, that safe base to dare to say, okay, I'm not doing well, I need XYZ in terms of support? We also talk about value and recognition. Do you feel when you go to work every day that you're happy to go to work? Do you feel that what you're contributing to the world is valuable? Do your personal values align with what you're working towards? That's not necessarily easy to do, but ideally if we were able to have those conversations early, people would be able to align themselves more with what is actually something that motivates them, rather than sitting on a Sunday and having a Sunday Monday blues and not wanting to go to work. There's a lot of other things. For example, is there a process to handle conflicts? We see this a lot in toxic work environments. The one thing that happens are very insidious conflicts that kind of fester and are never addressed. So there's a real process within a company to handle conflicts. I just had, this is not meant to be a pillar, but we did a restorative justice practice. It's a practice that's done, it was developed in the prison systems in the US for people who were either the victim or the person who was the harasser, or and the practice is meant to really put you face to face and open a dialogue about what really happened. And I had the pleasure of having that for my team because there was a conflict in my team currently. I'm lucky and also unlucky enough to navigate a corporate environment while also trying to fix other people's corporate environment. So we also put into practice every day. So those kind of things, do you have something in place to actually resolve a conflict when it happens? And I think the one thing that I would concretely notice is mental well-being in the work is no longer a problem, but it's something that is ingrained. So the reason why we're talking about this today is because we notice that there is a challenge around it. But I would like tomorrow, if we're treating well-being in the workplace as proactively as possible, that this doesn't stay the center of our discussion. That this becomes a non-discussion almost, where it's just completely normal for people to bring their whole selves to work and feel supported, feel like they are not at risk of burning out. Two sides.
And then for Sabine as well, we had an example of you, I don't know if you're, but it's, oh God, guys, I'm so sorry, I don't know.
That's fine.
But why, do you want to go?
No.
I'm reading, I don't know why I'm switching you.
But that's fine.
Just keeping you on your toes.
Should I use that? No, I talked already a little bit about the work that we do with the UN, and I liked what you shared about Soha, about how you operate as prevention of if there's already a crisis mode. With the UN, it's always a crisis mode, and so I wanted to jump back and just a tiny bit to the other question about leadership, because we see leadership through the compassionate lens, and we have this notion that's called compassionate leadership that's really at the center of what we do with the UN, and that's my absolute favorite module, and I wish we had time to practice tonight, but there's a radical compassion practice that we can do, and it's called Just Like Me. And so I've done that at L'Oréal, actually. I was just trying to get a little bit outside of the box and do this practice, and basically you pair people together and they have to practice just a very short meditation together, and then you start saying what we call like intentions, or we start thinking about things like, this person has been suffering just like me. This person has been experiencing loss just like me. And then, whoa, that's perfect. That's fine. That's where it's supposed to be. Thank you. I don't know why I was reading the whole time. Yes, exactly. And compassion, and I think compassion is a bit blurry for people in their mind, and especially at the UN, it's very important that every time we clear what is empathy and is not. Empathy is great. It's like feeling what others feel. But the problem with UN and with medical personnel who have a lot of high rates of burnout, by the way, in French hospitals and in the medical world, is the fact that you're not capable of creating healthy barriers in the environment that's high stress that you work in. And so compassion is empathy in action. That's the best definition of compassion. And so when you talk about compassionate leadership, you're trying to explain that everyone is a leader. Maybe you don't think you're a leader in your company because you're not the boss or you're not the manager, but you are a leader in your community, maybe in your family, with your group of friends. Maybe you're the leader of your cycling group, or there's so many forms of leadership. And I think empowering people to understand that and to also come with ideas, connect with our purpose, that's just very important. So yeah, we need to change the way management is done. And I think the new generation, you talked about millennials and Gen Z that are being hired, and now purpose is so important. And so, yeah, I need to reconnect with that.
Not really. No, anyways, the next question is supposed to be. Why are structural barriers to access at the community, healthcare, and corporate level? Why? Or something
Yeah, I
like
can talk about the challenges,
But
why
the
it's not widespread. Like,
But-
why are we here? And
Well, the question is, what models are beginning to work? Which trying to turn this into, not talking about only the negatives, but also what's beginning to work from your point of view. Something.
yeah, of course, otherwise I wouldn't be an investor. I think the market was not up for new opportunities, we wouldn't be there. No, I mean, we see a lot of great innovations in that space, and we see trends that are bringing the different stakeholders of the mental health value chain into place for these innovations to scale. So if you look at the value chain of mental health or health in general, you have, of course, the patients, but you also have the employers, you have the insurers, you have the pharma, and you have the public state, who is sometimes in certain countries reimbursing for this treatment or diagnosis. And the fact that we're looking into prevention actually changed the entire business model of that value chain, because now insurers need to look at prevention as a cost saving for later interventions that won't happen. And I think this is a change of mindset that we see more and more, especially with new technologies. You have a lot of innovations with VR, AR, digital therapeutics, EEG, so non-invasive brain technologies that every stakeholder needs to kind of acknowledge, because they will enable better prevention better diagnostics, and better treatments. And for that, AI is going to be super powerful because you're going to be able to run patterns and to improve the precision to which the treatment will be kept targeted to you because of all the data that they will be able to collect. So we see some changes. For example, in France, we have La Loi Pécan, which is allowing doctors to prescribe digital therapeutics and not only just pure medication. In Germany, it's DIGA. In the UK, you have the NHS, which is the public healthcare provider, who is also deciding about certain digital therapeutics to enter the market and to be prescribed by doctors and clinicians. So there is a lot of new technologies coming up. It's just not quick enough. The model of insurers moving to prevention versus intervention is not yet there. It's a lot of still pilots. So most of the startups that we invest in are still at the pilot phase when they talk to insurers or pharma. But it's getting there. So I can tell you, for example, a couple of solutions that works with insurers and pharma. So it's actually a French UK company dealing with Alzheimer and dementia. We are both investor in this company. What they've done is they've cracked the ability to identify the risk factors and the population at risk for Alzheimer and dementia. There are 4 risk factors that you can basically treat very well on your own. It's nutrition, it's sleep, it's social interaction, and it's fitness or movement. These 4 risk factors are what could trigger Alzheimer and dementia. And so through an app and the solutions that combine cognitive tests, gaming, and AI challenges, they try to improve these 4 risk factors so that it can delay as much as possible the arrival of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. And they sell this to insurers, for the insurers. So it's a B2B2C company. And they sell this also to pharma who are working on developing the drugs against Alzheimer. And this is a really great tool to identify the population at risk, to understand who needs a PET scan or who needs to go to the neurologist. So it actually simplify the triage that happens at the clinics. And it also enabled to be reinforcing the treatment when you have cognitive mild impairment. And so you see this evolving into this prevention, but it's still slow. And I would wish that any stakeholders in the value chain of health and mental health especially put more capital to work to bring these innovations that have evidence. I mean, we have studies, clinical trials that prove that certain technologies, when used well, have better efficacy and can also be more precise and more personalized to the patient that they're caring about. So there are evidence, it's not moving quickly enough. And there's also not enough capital, but that we can come back to this. Most of the financing, and it's literally like 1 or 2% of the healthcare budget only goes to mental health, when mental health is 15% of the healthcare burden. And that's just the visible part of the iceberg, because it's still very stigmatized. Not everyone talks about mental health issues. But so if you think about 15% of the burden, but only 1 or 2% of the public funding for health, there's a gap that needs to be financed. And so that's also the reason why we set up Masawa to bring more private capital into these innovations from not only public funding.
Super interesting. Thank you. So we're at the last big question. There's a lightning round. But the hot topic, AI, right, that we mentioned earlier. We can't talk about performance today without talking about AI. What do you see as the potential impact of AI on our mental health? What concerns and opportunities you see AI creating for mental health, focus, and human presence at work? And this is a question for everyone. So do you want to start with Scale or? Yeah.
I'm just going to completely plagiarize a very amazing podcast that I recently listened to by the first head of go-to-market at OpenAI. And on his podcast, he was talking about when, let's say, AI is evolved to such an extent that all problems, he separates them into discrete and open problems. Discrete cure for cancer. Could that theoretically be solved with a million brains on this problem, i.e. AI? Potentially and theoretically, yes. But what can't be solved is the open questions. Who am I? What is my purpose? You know, all the things that when it comes to mental health and building strength, we actually can't rely on AI to do because that's something that we need to do for us. So my personal view is, yes, to some extent it will be really bad for mental health because, you know, of course, like, I don't know, water, I'm sure there's some fancy study that someone has that I know that half of the jobs are going to go, etc., etc. But what it will force us to do, let's say we're all on universal basic income one day, force us to like prioritize these big questions. And that's again where a healthy mindset and strong mental resilience will need to be had, and hence we even need these services and skills even more so. So that's my.
I 100% agree with you. I couldn't have said it better. But
Yes, actually. So.
no, yes, I had this discussion already about like purpose, and that's the correct that no one, like some people are thinking about it, but everybody's saying AI is so amazing. Now I don't need to send emails, you know, it's like creating emails for me, whatever. But the problem is, the fact is now people are getting hired less, there's less jobs, there's actual studies that came out, people coming out of Harvard University are not getting jobs. It's a huge problem, and also the problem of purpose. Just feeling like, what am I going to do in my life? And Gen Z and the millennials are really into purpose.
Yeah, I think I can start by sharing that I have a bit more of a nuanced point of view. I go back and forth every day. Sometimes I love AI and sometimes I absolutely hate it. I think the reason that, I'll start with the positives. I do think, as a psychologist particularly, what I've noticed is AI is really, really useful for people to open up a dialogue. I think there was a study that came from the Harvard Business Review where they saw the usage of AI and they tried to understand what was the first 50 usages of AI, and actually the top one was companionship. People wanted to talk to someone, and it was really difficult to find someone to talk to in their real life because oftentimes we have this pressure from society of being judged, or we don't want to share with an actual human what we do feel comfortable sharing with an AI because there's no strings attached. So I think for that reason, it's really great because AI can allow people who otherwise would never have sought help to actually start a dialogue around mental health. We actually use this, and I've used this with patients, is sometimes if someone's having a really difficult time verbalizing, I'll have them turn around, talk to a wall, and they find it a lot easier to say it instead of looking me in the eyes and saying it to me. So I think for that reason, it's really great. It also allows people who are maybe on really long wait lists and don't have access to therapy to actually access therapy. Now, the place where I start to really become very skeptical and cautious of AI is AI does not do what an actual therapist can do, which is AI doesn't challenge you. It creates it's very, very funny. If you ever talk to them, it's very empathic. The first response that AI will give to you, specifically I'm talking about the LLM models, like the large language models, they'll respond with reassurance and say, that's a great question, or wow, that was really thoughtful. So it's very positive. It actually it drags you in. It's a positive reinforcement. It's a tactic that's done on purpose for you to continue to use it. The problem with that is AI is not going to challenge you. The whole idea behind therapy is you start with positive reinforcement. So I build therapeutic alliance with people. I do really validate them. I'm empathic and I understand. Once we have that therapeutic alliance, my next approach is to then challenge some of their irrational thinking. That's how you do treatment. With AI, it never challenges your irrational thinking unless you prompt it. But the people that are the most vulnerable will never prompt AI to say, okay, challenge me, tell me a different point of view. And that's where we've seen some of the very unfortunate cases where people have either committed suicide or actually done harm to themselves or other people because AI has really polarized their thinking. So that's my take on AI.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have too much to add to this because I'm kind of also quite torn between the two, because in terms of healthcare, I think it can do tremendous things, much more personalized, targeted to your specific needs. And I'm here probably more talking about curable disease, cancer, diabetes, anything which is basically looking at collection of data, which taken all together will help provide some patterns and better efficacy of medications or any interventions. But it needs to be built in a way which is ethical, responsible, and universal. And at the moment, AI is built on, I'm sorry to say, but white men data. So if you look at brain health, for example, the diagnostics and treatments are completely different between men and women. If you're in perimenopause or menopause as a woman, your brain cognitive functions kind of are similar to a man. So, and this is absolutely not taking into account the data that it's being trained on. So there is disparities that needs to be solved, so that AI is actually like covering the entire populations across minorities, across regions, to be able to define and identify different patterns depending on ethnicities, gender, etc. I think that's not the case yet. Second, there is no guardrails or escalation mode when, for example, an unintended use of ChatGPT, which is first use case companionship, as you said, is being reinforcing depression and anxiety and leading to suicide. There is absolutely no escalation or some guardrail where you could have a human in the loop that's in that case. So let's just have another type of intervention, because AI is going to reinforce. I mean, for sure, we've all used ChatGPT, and you've all experienced this kind of great feeling to feel like you're always right. Which also might be a threat for our democracy, because it's polarized. And you don't have debate anymore, dialogue, where people are, not from the same opinion, and then suddenly, you just don't know how to react anymore. And then conversing with a machine, and that's what I discussed and listened to at Davos last week, is also completely different than talking to a human. Most of the Gen Z and millennials have a tremendous fear of taking their phone and calling people, or asking a question in the street, or being in a bar and start talking to a stranger. Because they've been hacked to text, to write, and not being able to confront eye contact, dialogue, debate, etc. And I think there's a very high risk, and that's especially after, and there are a lot of different books I can recommend about what we call this anxious generation, which we've been through the smartphone and the social media addiction, and we're going through now addiction to AI. And if we reinforce this use of AI for positivism to kind of feel good about ourselves, which is in a sense good, but it needs mindfulness, it needs presence, it needs to acknowledge that this is a machine. And what, unfortunately, the AI builder are doing at the moment is to hack your attachment, to feel like you're attached to this AI, which is considered as a person, and to kind of replace the attachment you would have for your mother or your father or a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And so people will start wanting to talk to a machine more than to a human being. And that attachment hacking will reinforce special opinions and special considerations that you would that are going to silo a little bit our world. So I'm a little bit more negative, but I hope, and that's my positive note to finish on, that because this will be a wake-up call. There will be a wake-up call that we don't want this AI, which are being built by tech founders that have not resolved their own trauma. I mean, if you look at the Californian tech founders, they don't even give the smartphones and the social media and all these tools to their kids. I mean, you know, it's just like this complete aberration. So I'm just waiting for this wake-up call where people will start talking about what's happening. Because AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. What are we going to do with our time? We're going to just scroll because we're going to be like motivated and driven by impulse to kind of have more likes and see more things that reinforce our opinion. No, I don't think that's what we want. And so I invite you to think outside of the box and see what's out there. Go back to nature. Have trees. That's what happens for me.
So that's a good segue for the last thing, which is one sentence each, and maybe that's your sentence. What is one concrete thing people here can do this week to protect their focus, energy, and emotional balance?
I would leave you with the question, when you get stressed, what is the sign from your body that gives you?
I have a method that's called STOP. It's very efficient. S for stop, T for take a breath, O for observe, and then P for pursue. Keep going after awareness.
Can I do one? I journal now, and every week there's a weekly challenge. And one of the ones that stuck out at me the most recently was smile at a stranger this week. So I challenge you to smile at a stranger.
And mine will go in the same direction as sharing vulnerabilities, because that opens a lot of doors for dialogues, and hug people, trees.
I had plenty to choose from, but I'm going to choose one that's a little bit of a different thematic, but it's related to hyperconnection. Turn your phone into black and white mode, so grayscale, and see how that messes with the dopamine release that you have when you're scrolling. Just as an experiment, try it. It's going to be extremely frustrating.
I do that now from 8 p.m. onwards. I do that.
It's really frustrating.
Okay, well that's it. Sorry if we've gone a bit over. We have, just so you know, there's a bar downstairs if anyone wants to hang around, have a drink, have a snack. I'm actually supposed to, I don't know if the technician is still here, but to put the next slide, is it unlocked? But there's a QR code. If anyone, there it is. 6-question survey, just to let us know if you like this, if you appreciated it, if there's something you would change, if you want to be kept up to date. Just for, especially for Noelle, who wasn't here today, it would be helpful for her to know if you know, she I think she did an amazing job, and you know, thanks to the ladies here and William also for being part of this and making sure it all went well. And again to eSpot. So a round of applause to everyone. And I mean, if there's any questions, I know it's late, but if there's any specific question, sorry?
Perhaps just 2 or 3.
Yeah, if there's anyone for an open question or for someone specific.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I'm a consultant. I work with organizations that performance and teams and collaboration. So everything that was said is super interesting for me from the corporate point of view. And I was wondering, for some of your programs, those 2 ladies, how do you get into those companies? How does it start? Because I'm sure that when people hear what you do or experience it, they are convinced and you can move on. But how does it start? Who is the first person or the first moment when you meet these people and to get started? I'm curious.
It's the question, how do we get into corporations?
How do those corporations know what you do and bring you on board?
It's very organic. So for Bloom and for my personal experience, as I shared, when I started the company, it was really just a studio in Paris, and that's all I thought about it. I had the plan for later to develop B2B, but then B2C turned into B2B because clients saw the quality of our classes and that we're serious. It's a secular place. It's modern. It's where everyone is backed by science. We work with over 50 specialists, and we actually train our people, which I think a lot of organizations don't do. We care, we really care. And I think you can feel it when you start working with Bloom, or Pascal, and she's amazing. And so I'll just share this. I'm not supposed to say it, but it's okay. No,
There's no judging in
I'm
this
not
space.
supposed to write it down. But I can say it, yeah. No. But basically, a funny story is that my staff members sometimes don't check the voicemail of the studio, which drives me crazy because it's important to return calls, right? It's good customer service. And one of the voicemail was from Chanel, saying we would like to be in touch with you and maybe see what you can offer for us. And no one had returned that call. And now we are at Chanel every week. So that's very important. And I think word to mouth too, partnering with so many different brands, like Lululemon actually is a really good brand that brings mental health. That's thanks to them that I met UN. I think for me, it's a lot of people that try it, and then LinkedIn, like starting to talk about it, and yeah, it's really organic. I think if the quality of your service is great, as a service provider, it's
I would just say exactly the same. It's all network.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's
all
all value of surely for the files. You may have seen people here tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there are some companies that are more attuned to these types of exercises, and we just released with our venture partner, Prospera Global, a mental health report on financing innovations and who is actually active in this space. And it's divided between different types of capital, but you have the list of philanthropists, and within these philanthropists, you have a lot of corporate foundations. And so as soon as you see that there's a corporate foundation investing in mental health, you can be sure that the company itself is investing in mental health. So that's the case of Lululemon, that's the case of Lego, that's the case of Zurich Insurance. So all these are like, I can give you the link of the report, but you kind of see from their branding and the way they are visible online if they care influence.
Any other questions?
And I have a question to go back to what you were saying about the gender element involved in mental health and performance. Just even looking at the panel itself, I mean, how do you see, I saw a video of this man talking about what he called the hot, crazy matrix, okay, is what he called it. And he's basically referring to how you can, what type of women you could be. And comparing that against, what type of men you should meet, which is based on cute and money. Okay, that was the graph that he was doing. All right, so already when you starting out talking about women, he used a baseline of basically saying you start at 4 for the crazy aspect for women. All right, I know it sounds really crazy, or I hate to use the word crazy too, but I mean, how do you address, this, I guess, the perception that, yes, this is mental health is more of a woman's issue, so that, and also women tend to talk more, so it's basically accepted for women to do so, and men who maybe have, I'm not even myself, let me see, but I mean, how they address it, so.
Should we ask the men in the audience? And there are some initiatives around men mental health specifically, because we've seen that it's not in their core to be vulnerable, for sure. And our society has not raised men to actually become vulnerable and to be not protecting the women. So there is this challenge, I would say, but this is changing. I mean, I've seen in my space, most of the founders are female women. There is no gender differences. Actually, I have even more men founders in my portfolio than women. But I think it's also a change of narrative, right? We talk about vulnerability, we talk about mental health, maybe we should talk about performance, mental strength, resilience, because at the end of the day, that speaks more to them. I don't know, maybe I'll ask the men in the audience.
Just wanted to add to that. Actually, who was supposed to be on this panel instead of me, I stepped in for him last minute, is our co-founder. So Monkakir was founded by two men. So it's very strange to have men within the mental health sphere, but both of them have a background from BCG, and they saw the environment, they saw the performance pressure that was put, and they wanted to change that. So that's where that was founded. The other point that I actually wanted to say is, what I've noticed is men will not open up a dialogue about their feelings, but they will talk about their body. So that's where I think the ladies over there are doing impeccable work, because men will come into therapy or talk about it if, for example, they haven't slept for 3 months because their body feels weak or their body feels like there's something wrong physically with them. So I think the breath and the body work, what I've noticed is initially men will have this impression that, oh, it's a soft skill and I don't want to do meditation, those are just weird Buddhism. But once they do it, they realize how it feels in their body, and I think that speaks to them. So words might be really difficult because we're not conditioned men to use their words, but they will talk about their body, trust me.
And I compare them to like sports and athletes.
Yeah.
Because that talks to them.
Yes.
I wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me. I went to Barnard, Columbia, so I'm glad that, thank you for putting this all together. I came, and maybe like some other people, I didn't really know what to expect because it's something called me. I'm a vocal coach and also a voice actor and a singer. So that's my therapy, is actually working with the voice, not only the instrument, but the content and the presentation, and I think you guys did a fabulous job. I think what speaks to me is thinking about the next generation and how we can start in schools, we can start in preschool and nursery school, having people talk to each other and socialize and work in a group. And it's true that it's a little bit alarming. I looked at ChatGPT for the first time today, and I can see why some French people have been saying, "Mon pote ChatGPT," and it scares me because they said that the way it's prompted, it's like somebody like a pal or something, but it's not, and so it's quite alarming. So, and I have a son who's 20, so I'm really concerned about where this is going. But that's great if the new generation are expecting to be taken care of and they want that. We need to help them. But thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a question, just kind of piggybacking on that. What do you hear about kind of mindfulness in adults and hopefully kind of cascading down to the next generation? What studies or what may exist for, teenagers or even kids? I think a lot of parents in them have anxiety around, well, kids' futures, like what mindfulness looks like in kids in adolescence.
I can start and maybe you want to. I think I'm also a mom of 2 young girls, they're 7.5 and 4. I think kids are in the present moment a lot of the time, especially if they don't have screens, which is great. I think a law was just passed today that in France that social media are banned before 15 years old, and that's also great. I know that one might be competitor, but it's great. And we're all working towards the same goal in the end, and it's amazing. It's Petit Bambou is trying to bring it into schools, and they just started a really good program about it. There's something called Cannes, comme une grenouille, from Elise Snell. It sounds silly, but it's amazing. I personally try to do a lot of yoga with my kids. At first, they loved. At first, I remember the older one was like closing her eyes and just opening it, like, doing it with her. But now they understand, and actually, my 4-year-old led the best shavasana, which is like a body scan I've ever had, with a lot of breath. Focusing on the breath for a long time, I almost fell asleep. So it's actually extremely important we teach our kids, I think, from a young age. It's not because they're young and their attention span is like shorter than ours that we shouldn't focus on them. And there's a lot to do, and I think Pascal and I were talking about that too, and like going into schools and stuff, but the French are always so scared. There was mindfulness programs that were started in schools and they stopped it because I'm going to say this in French, but certains programmes ont été un peu détournés, by people that maybe didn't have the right training or the right intentions. And that's so bad because they canceled the initiative. But I think one of my mission is to invest in the future, and that's also why when we invest at least in students, we offer classes for €5, which is obviously not profitable for us, but it's great to just invest in the new generations, and they're so happy to come to a class and they're like, this is so chic. Can I put my bag here for $5? Yes, I can even practice. But no, it's really important. So it's one.
It's a huge topic, as you know, how we save through the next generation. And I think when I have people come to me and ask, okay, but for kids, I really want to teach them emotional regulation and stuff. It's great, but unless you as a parent have that skill, you cannot expect your kid to learn that, because kids have to be taught that skill by someone. And so the biggest service we can do for our kids is to learn and be aware of the skills. And then the second is legislation, and like the social media rules, then the legislation comes around AI. We need our governments to understand this impact. We can't, it's us as an individual against billion-dollar companies, and we have no chance unless also governments get involved. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a great book called The Anxious Generation. Which has some scary scenarios, but also some pretty useful tools. And there are a lot of startups that are looking into this strategy. So how do you bring back in the curriculum, the values of compassion, empathy, the soft skills, right? So, and I used to have, when I was in France as a kid, citizenship. So some classes where you talk about like what it is to be a good citizen, which I get challenged anymore. And so I think that there is some work being done on the curriculum to kind of reintegrate this, especially with AI. I think also teaching kids not just to avoid AI, but actually to understand what AI is and to prompt AI correctly in the way that it can actually ask to get challenged by AI. I think this will be also extremely useful. And I think what we also work on in terms of investment is community-based initiative, because we're using this aspect of community where people are together and they share something in common. We have the church; it's not so popular anymore. We have sports, but it's also everyone trained on their own machine. So how do you kind of bring back this community aspect in day-to-day life of a kid, so that he has people to talk to, he has common shared values, there is so some common interest. I think this is also quite important, but I don't have much of those.
Very last question. I don't know, because you're the HR person. I'm interested what you're going to ask. Next to you.
It's very interesting for me because I'm a HR person, but I'm actually moving into AI. I'm having a career change, so everything you said is fascinating. One of the things I've noticed around some of the wellness initiatives, and it's really where companies invest in their employees, sometimes I think it puts a lot of agency on the employee to fix their problems, to become more resilient. When sometimes, and we touched on it, there are leadership problems or there are structural problems. How do you touched on sometimes leading from the top down and the bottom up, but how do you sometimes convince leaders that there are structural changes or changes they need to make personally or as a group to make the investment employees are making in their well-being?
There's a short answer and a long answer. I'll start with the short answer. The short answer is you talk to them about what other companies are doing. Mm-hmm. That really works. When you tell them, oh, I was talking to the CEO of the Maison, blah, 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 you can imagine which one. Their ears are open. They're like, oh, okay, what's happening? Oh, yeah, it's happening. That really gets them. So there's this sense, I don't know if it's the sense of competitiveness or what are other people doing so we can also put ourselves on the market. That's that short answer. The long answer is I think they see results. So it takes time, but they see results. Oftentimes when companies bring us in, they'll bring us in at the moment of the crisis. So there's an employee who passed away or an employee who got hurt or there's a case of harassment. When they see the effects and the benefits of that, that's when the leadership gets intrigued about, okay, what is this mental health initiative and can we learn more about it? So it works a bit if we start with that reactivity and then we kind of go into the proactivity. Okay, what can we build in so that we're not going to have that much absenteeism, so that we can make it more productive. The other thing that also really works for leadership is you talk about performance. So I think someone earlier said that they're in the consulting world. So one of the things I hear from anyone who has ever been in consulting is, I don't want to change anything. I just want my workforce to be more resilient so they can produce more. And that's where you can start the conversation of, okay, if in order for them to produce more, you need to change certain things. That's kind of how you bring them on board. And that answers your question.
Call it a night. Okay, well, thank you again. And downstairs, if you want to get yourself a drink or a snack.